We have Mr. Rajiv Bajaj now joining us. If you can go across to him, he's Managing Director at Bajaj Auto. Mr. Bajaj, good morning. Good to have you with us here.
Good morning.
We'll be reading over those pictures as people sort of are there to pay their last respects. But Mr. Bajaj, you know, how would you remember Mr. Tata, and what would you like to share with us?
Good morning, Prashant. Well, obviously, like everybody else, I feel extremely saddened. In my case, there is a little bit of a personal angle to it for two reasons. One, Mr. Tata and my father were classmates at the Cathedral School in Mumbai. And secondly, you know, in my 35 years of work life, I have basically worked in just one company, Bajaj Auto, for 34 of those 35 years. But the whole year, I had the good fortune of spending at Tata Motors here in Pune. So I was, in that sense, prepared for Bajaj Auto by Tata Motors.
Rajiv, that's a very interesting insight. And actually, talk to us more. We were just discussing this. I was just looking at Mr. Ratan Tata's early life, and that he shared the classroom space with the likes of your father. Any anecdotes, any memories from your early years, seeing the two visionaries together, or perhaps if you could recall what your father spoke to you about when it came to the House of Tatas?
Well, I'll tell you a little story, Surbi. You know, I've met Mr. Tata obviously fleetingly many a times, but in depth once, I think about 15 years back, sometime in 2008, 2009. This is the time when Tatas were contemplating making the Nano, and I was thinking about our quadricycle, the Qute. And something just inspired me to go across and meet a potential competitor who was my father's age. I sought a meeting. I was granted one. I went to Tata House one evening at about 4 o'clock. And I must share with you what happened there. I waited for him in his office. And when he came to me, for the first 10 minutes, all he did was vent, actually. He told me one by one about 15 instances all through school when my father had bullied him on different occasions. And in the classroom, even in the bathroom, and I was just speechless. I didn't know what to do, and I have to this date carried a diary to schedule my day for every year. So I made a careful note of all that in my diary, and all my 35 diaries are with me in my office, so I'm sure I can still find my notings in this regard. So I wrote all this down. And when I came back, I sat in front of my father and I said to him, this is what Mr. Tata says about you. And my father said, oh, you know how my father was. He just waved his hand and he said, this is all rubbish or something to that effect. But I told him word for word, and the actual words Mr. Tata had used were the exact words that my father, that typical of my father. So I knew that Mr. Tata was 100% correct, and he was remembering this after 60 years. So that has always stayed with me. Other than that, two quick points. One, he then asked me about my work, and when he talked about the Nano, he said that the Tatas had actually benchmarked the Bajaj Auto Rickshaw, particularly its engine, when the project started. And I said to him, sir, let's do this together. And he said, yeah, I'm open to it. Let me talk to my people. I'll come back to you. That was one. And the second was, the silver tray that he brought out, the coffee, the slice of cake at 4 o'clock in the evening. And he was in between two board meetings. He walked me to the elevator, waited there till the doors shut. Now, if you put these three things together and connect these dots, whether it was the memories from childhood, whether it was the hospitality, or whether it was the openness to work together, I think it tells me one thing about the person. He was a very, very sensitive man, a man of extraordinary sensitivity. And I think the world needs more people like that who are sensitive to everything that happens around them.
Rajiv, one can really hope that people across spectrum are really listening to the anecdotes that you're sharing, and many others, including Mr. Parekh. I think that fact about humility has really come through from all the messages and all the conversations that we've had. And one hopes that not just business leaders, I mean, whether it's millennials or Gen Z, entrepreneurs, everybody takes this message in and tries to imbibe it at least a little bit. Rajiv, in fact, talk to us more about the two very contrasting personalities. It's so good that you've taken this call. Because on one hand, and I remember the last time we had these emotions pour out, it was actually at the very unfortunate passing away of Mr. Rahul Bajaj. Two very contrasting personalities, one who's shy, sort of staying away from the limelight, not speaking much in public, and the other who really spoke his mind. And both of them have made such huge contribution to this country. So how do you see these contrasting personalities? And, you know, personally, where do you place yourself? And what would your message be in terms of just personal conduct for entrepreneurs and business leaders?
Well, I guess, you know, one of my favorite quotes, Survi, is that of the physicist Niels Bohr, who said, the opposite of a truth is another profound truth. You know, and I think if we internalize that thought, we would realize that there is no need to always judge what is right, what is wrong, what is better, what is worse. We must simply accept that the world is full of polarities. And I think in that sense, as you observe, Mr. Tata and my father were in a way polar opposites. But let me also tell you, under Mr. Tata's very private and demure self, as I saw it, I also saw a very determined, steely personality. And I can tell you equally, under my father's outwardly, you know, gregarious and outspoken self, there was a very soft and emotional side to him within that. And I think this is true of all of us. So I think if we bear in mind that we live in a world of polarities, there will be far greater tolerance in the world, and we need that as much as we need sensitivity.
No, that's so beautifully put. By the way, the visuals are still pouring in. You can see Mr. Noel Tata there, very much meeting people who are coming in. I saw some politicians there as well. Mr. Praful Patel was there, and some of the other NCP leaders, etc., also behind him. Rajiv, if I can, so let's just talk a little bit of business in that sense now. For someone to have run that and for such a long time, industrial group like the Tatas, I mean, I assume capital allocation across businesses perhaps is top of mind. And that is such an important function, is also such a heavy responsibility. But he did make big, bold bets, right? I mean, he went overseas in a really big way from India Inc. back in 2007-8 with his acquisitions in steel and, of course, autos as well. What are your thoughts in that regard, and any learnings in that sense? You did just now mention that he was determined in what he did, although he was, of course, polite and compassionate and all of that. But what would your learnings be in that sense?
Well, I'd make 2 points, I suppose, Prashant. On a specific note, I would say that there is no doubt that what Mr. Tata did with JLR and Tata Steel at that time inspired a lot of us. And it's no secret that, when we set off on our partnership, first with KTM and then with Triumph over the next years, after he had done what he did, that certainly served to kind of embolden, inspire us, give us confidence, that, we can also do it kind of thing. And, we can also be global brands and play on the world stage. So there is no doubt, I think, in my mind that that definitely inspired us, as I'm sure it did so many others. And then there is also, the general point I would make, that I would say for myself, that I'm a person, I believe, who is much more, let's say, adept with the depth than with width. And what I mean by that is that, I can do only one thing at a time, really. As I said in the beginning, I have spent 34 or 35 years at Bajaj Auto, just focused on one thing in some detail. But to handle multiple things equally adeptly is really beyond my capability, frankly. And some people, are good with scale, but they're not necessarily good with depth and excellence. I think what you see in Mr. Tata is a person, who was master of both excellence and scale. And he demonstrated that, as you said, across the spectrum of activities and across decades. So what better role model can there be for all of us going into the future than this example?
Rajiv, finally, just some thoughts on trust. And you were discussing this earlier, that the house of Tatas, became synonymous with trust. It didn't matter which Tata brand you were, looking at, or whether you were buying Tata Salt, or whether you were looking at, investing in the financial services business through them. So when we talk about trust, what is your read-through? I mean, how is it built? How can a business house, preserve it, and make it last in such a durable way?
Well, it's obviously built over a long time. It's built by action and not just by words. And I would entirely endorse what you said, Surbhi, that, when you walk the talk repeatedly. I'll give you a very small example of when I was at Tata Motors. And we heard that Mr. Tata was visiting one day, and a proposal was placed before him that, like the Japanese would do, Tata Motors should have one common canteen where managers and workers would both eat, so as to build like a common culture. Now, I guess this is one of those things that builds trust in an organization. When he was taken around and this idea was proposed to him, I'm told Mr. Tata said, "Oh, that's a wonderful idea, to have everyone in the same place, eating the same food, etc., and build that brotherhood. But please do take care that you elevate the workers to the manager's level and do not downgrade the managers to the workers' level." So again, I would like to say trust is built on the sensitivity we talked about. Trust is built, on the tolerance we talked about. And trust is built on actually, again, in this example of looking at something in detail, having the awareness of mind to apply himself to something as small as a canteen facility and make sure that all of his people are well taken care of. I think this is how true leaders behave.
That's again such wonderful stories, Rajiv, and really inspiring to hear that. On a side note, my son used to go to a cathedral as well, so that's I'll tell him that's something he's got common with. And when he's still young, but we used to. And Bombay House is of course next door, Rajiv, right? I mean, to that school. And we used to, of course, I used to tell him to identify everything that you see Tata. I mean, a Tata car or, the other brands which are so synonymous all around us. So it's really a business ecosystem from which you can learn so much. And I think we all have in some ways, and we will continue to do so. Mr. Bajaj, thank you very much for joining us. Great to have you with us here with all those stories, anecdotes, and of course, what you learned from Mr. Tata himself. Thank you very much.